Yeah. Yeah, right.
It's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Some of the people in the back, there are some seats up here. I didn't turn on. Hello, there are some seats up here for anybody who wants to sit, and a couple over here. And a few over here,
There.
so don't be bashful, come on up. I left it on, so be careful of what you say. Yeah.
You'll start. That'll do. Get your husband to come up?
No, he won't.
Okay.
We still have a few seats up here.
About 10.
4 over here. 5 over here. Couple over here.
It's 11 o'clock. Anytime you want to start.
So I want to thank everybody for coming. Mom would be absolutely thrilled because the most important things to her are family and friends. So thank you. Before we get too far in, I'm Betsy. I am the favorite daughter, which is not very hard to do in this family. Over here is Dirk, he's the youngest. Tom is over there. He's the middle child, just above me, and the oldest is Jim. Oh.
By far.
I would continue with other families, but we would be here all day. We have several people in the family who want to say something, and then we will open it up to other people who might want to say something. Afterwards, on the first floor, we have hors d'oeuvres and beer and wine and drinks afterwards, the reception. So after we're finished up here, everybody's more than welcome to come downstairs and we can all chat and get caught up. Jim, I'm gonna have you go first.
Yeah, that was the plan, right? That was the plan. I'm Jim Sonneborn. I think hopefully we have more than just hors d'oeuvres, since it's 11 o'clock and we're probably all going to be here for a couple of hours. So hopefully we have plenty of food so people can visit. So first of all, I shared this with a few people last night. The number for today is 36,850, which is the number of days that my mother was alive. Life is a journey, and my mother was an amazing woman, but she was not amazing in a vacuum. She grew up here in this community. She went to the Albany Academy for Girls pretty much across the street. You know, her parents, and I should say, I'm going to try and not say anything that all of the people who follow me are going to say, but I'm going to give you a thought as you listen to the other people. So my mother grew up in a house where her dad, Gates Aufsesser, was involved in the community. He had a business. He was the president of the board of the Albany Hospital, much larger than just a hospital now. He was very much involved in the community. He drove an ambulance in World War I, which I am told was the most dangerous job in the war. And her mom, Bessie DeBeer Aufsesser, was a very proper lady. She had beautiful antiques and she had a beautiful home. And along with Mrs. Cogswell, she was one of the founders of Planned Parenthood. If you knew my grandmother, you would find that an incomprehensible reality that she did that. But you all knew my mother, and we all are very much the product of those who come before us. And I will address those who come after her in a minute. But you shouldn't be all that surprised that her parents were who they were, because she took all of the things that her parents gave her and multiplied them, expanded on them, and handed them off to all of us, particularly her children and her grandchildren. I need to say that, and I think probably most of you know this story, my parents knew each other for 6 days when they got engaged. These people knew their minds. And in the case of my father, who was also very much involved as a leader in the community, as I have reflected on today, it wasn't the example of his parents. It was the example of my mother and the things that she learned from her parents that were what motivated my dad to be involved. And it's absolutely the case that everything that he did, as well as everything that she did, was a product of them, and very much a product of her values and her ideas. And they were a couple. For years after my dad died, which was 9+ years ago, she would say, "It's so good that he went first. So good. How would he have ever managed? He would never be able to manage." Now, of course, she was right. He would never have managed. But, here she was, 90-something years old. Her husband is dead. And who is she worried about? She's worried about, well, what if he had gone first? She's always worried about other people. And in the last decade or so, she sort of reinvented herself. She rediscovered bridge. She made a whole lot of new friends. You're 90-something years old and you're in many ways starting over. It was only a couple of years ago, because she really couldn't see anymore, that we canceled the subscription to the Sunday Times, because she was involved in the Beverwyck community, in the Albany community, in the world. She really, every decade, reinvented herself as a person. And I need to really stop. And as I say this, I need to single out my sister and my brother-in-law, who, as is the case with my sister, who was my parents' favorite daughter, Tom was their favorite son-in-law also. But I have to, I mean, I cannot overstate, my mother would not have lived to be 100 years old if it was not for the two of them, if it was not for Betsy, who came to see her often every day, sometimes more than once a day and several times a week, and cared for her, took her to the doctor, took her to the dentist, bought her clothes and brought them back. And Tom, who was, I mean, could not have been more supportive and more understanding of all of the things that Betsy was doing. And I do want you to know that I remember that when my sister was a teenager, they didn't get along quite as well as they did in the last 10 years. But all of the things that my mother taught my sister came back to help my mother. And I know that as for my sister, and I hope for all of us, we took the same lessons and we passed them on to our children. So when we get much older than we already are, they can do as much, maybe they will, as Betsy did. But Betsy was just remarkable. So this is a celebration about my mother. So I want to tell you a story. And as you hear the story, as everybody gets up, you get to measure what they say against the story. I was 15 years old and we were driving down Marion Avenue, heading towards New Scotland Avenue. And at the time, that was the rich neighborhood, as far as I knew. And I must have said something about all the money these people had made. And my mother just flat out said, in this family, we do not measure money, and we do not measure success with money. So as everyone gets up to speak, I would like you to keep that in mind. And as I say that, I want to sort of single out, I'm not sure I scribbled these down, Julia and Emily and McKenna and Lauren and Amelie and Elizabeth and Leah, who are women and soon to be women, who are girls. And they will, some of them get up and say something about my mother. In Jewish funeral services, we talk about people live on in the minds of those who have followed them for the lessons they have done, the things that they have done for other people. And I pick out the girls because they may want to talk about the example that my mother, their grandmother, great grandmother has set. But I don't want to leave out, and I'm afraid I'm going to, Alex, Matt, David, Paul, Ted, Todd, Dan, Robert, Declan, Finnegan, Louis. For those of you who don't know this, at some point in the future, maybe the 31st of December, another great-grandchild, and March 31st, yet another great-grandchild. But for those of you, I look at you in particular, it's an example. It's also an opportunity. You know, my mother very quietly broke through a lot of barriers and did things to make her community and her world a better place. And all of you can, I charge you not to be burdened by it, to be celebrating it. My last thing I want to say before somebody takes the mic is when we go downstairs, please don't express condolences to Betsy and Tom. Thank them for everything that they did for my mom. I've said it a couple of times now, but I cannot overemphasize that at least the last decade of my mother's life was very much made a better place because of what Betsy and Tom was over there, you know, doing all kinds of things with that, any herald or thank you or anything. But thank them, don't express condolences. My mother said we are to celebrate and we should. And do you want to say something, or should we hand this to somebody else? It's all yours, kid.
Thank you. So, my mother was very active, as Jim had said. And if I listed everything, we again would be here all day, but Paresis for the Red Cross, starting an after-school reading program, Two Together, the Albany Institute, Albany Historic Foundation, I mean, it goes on and on. We will never be able to replace it. I could spend a lifetime and I couldn't do half of what she did. So Lauren, I'm going to call on you next. Lauren is the oldest granddaughter. You're at an early start.
Hi, everybody. As Betsy said, I am Betty's granddaughter. And I do want to mention also Emily and Katie, because we had to stick together. There are a lot of men in this sea of people out here, and we've had to stick together and fend for ourselves in a lot of ways, but we really did. I feel like we really stuck together. So I'm also a very proud mom, and I'm gonna try to keep my emotions at bay. I learned that from grandma as well. I learned how to love being a parent. And I would like to attribute some of that also to my mom, who learned from grandma also how to be a spectacular mom. I think grandma had a great influence on my mother and my mother on me, and I'm hoping to pass that down to the next generations. And I think they've both done a wonderful job, my mom and my grandmother, if I do say so myself. So I want to start with how I decided what to say today. I actually read in the Times Union, I think there was a piece recently here, and there was one line that really stood out to me. And the Albany Institute of History and Art, the former AIHA board president, Phoebe Powell Bender, she was elected as the board's first female president in 1986, which it was earlier. I'm sure grandma did too. But she said, she was quoted as saying that grandma worked very well with people. But if it was necessary to argue, she argued. And that is a standout for me. I think that says a lot about who she was, and who she continues to be in the generations that follow, male, female. I think she knew how to instill that in us. And so I'm going to go off speech a little bit and give you some quotes that sort of inspired me to speak to you today. But they inspired me to speak to you today because they were grandma's inspiration. One of the things she and I have talked about in maybe not so recent years, but in the past, we talked a lot about Justice Ginsburg. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg had she was a big presence as well, to say the least. And my grandmother, the Rosie the Riveter in her, was inspired by her. So I wanted to take some of Justice Ginsburg's words and let them tell the story of grandma as well. I think she would have liked that and been flattered, but also humbled. So I would like to try to interrupt the things in this world that need to be interrupted and just cause people to take pause. I think that's what grandma did when she knew she needed to argue something. I never think she did it with malice. I think she had a vision and wanted to share it. one of the quotes that I'll start with is, whatever you choose to do, leave tracks. That means you don't do it just for yourself. You will want to leave the world a better place for your having lived. Ginsburg had so many of these quotes, and they probably will be repeated by some of you, or maybe not. But what stands out to me is leaving tracks. And my grandma taught my dad how to talk. Grandma taught my dad how to read, and Betsy, she stayed home with those two and knew she needed to give them access to language that was especially difficult for them in particular. She was a great mom to more than just her 4 children, but giving them access to language and their society was groundbreaking at the time. And my dad, I feel like, and Betsy, but from my personal experience, my dad is her tracks. She's leaving her tracks by giving us this gift of my dad. He's a successful grandfather. I mean, and he has lived every moment of his life as she would have wanted. He left tracks. He decided to work with kids for 25 years. I might not have that right, but 25 years working with other kids who have multiple disabilities and giving them access to art as a form of communication. So he was giving back what he got. And then even after that, he left that field, not to stray very far, but to be an advocate for other kids who were mainstreamed, deaf kids who were coming into public schools and had less access to education and less access to language than the rest of the kids. And I heard a story that grandma started that mentality for my dad and for Betsy she stayed home with them, learned with them, and then marched into that public school and said, just so you know, I have 2 deaf kids and they're going to be coming to this school next year, so you better get ready. And that's how they were mainstreamed. Kids with disabilities didn't go to mainstream schools at the time. So they walked through that door next year and the school got ready or learned how to get ready, as the case may be. So grandma's leaving her tracks, and her tracks are everywhere in this room. I like this one. This one comes back to the arguing piece a little bit more. Justice Ginsburg said, "We have made huge strides, but we have not reached nirvana. There's still rampant discrimination on the basis of race and gender. It's true that most of the explicit classifications, men are treated this way, women that way, are gone from the law books. But what remains is what's been called an unconscious bias. One excellent example of that is the symphony orchestra. I love this example. In my growing up years," she said, "I never saw a woman in a symphony orchestra, except perhaps a harp player." I think that's a really nice example. It's quite relatable. And I think that unconscious bias was a really important message for her. She wanted to stand where no other women had stood before. She wanted to advocate for communities that hadn't been advocated for before. And I think that was her arguing, being a presence where she knew that she needed to be. She taught me that gender and race matters. And to stand in that presence, stand in that light, and walk through it. And I don't think I could have learned that in any other way but having models, the tracks that she's left. I liked this one. This is the last one. I won't bore you any longer. I miss grandma a lot. Here's Ruth Bader Ginsburg on how she'd like to be remembered, which quite easily parallels with grandma, I think. She wanted to be remembered as someone who used whatever talent she had to do her work to the very best of her ability. Grandma used to say, do every job like you would do it for the Queen of England. And I did, or I'm trying. And to help repair tears in society, to make things a little better through the use of whatever ability she has, to do something outside of myself, is what Justice Ginsburg said. When I was, when I was 10 or 12, somewhere in there, I was struggling a lot in school, and the way I did school looked different than other kids. We'll wrap it up. It looked different, and my parents knew, they're quite educated. And so I learned that I was learning differently than other kids. And that's a hard thing to hear for a parent, is when their kid isn't their image of perfect, or someone else's image of perfect, at least. And so they called for advice to grandma and grandpa, and grandma and grandpa said on the phone, probably each on different phones, but in the same room, you know, that we used to do that. And they said, what can we do? And my parents said to them, just continue to be Lauren's cheerleader. And my grandmother was that for me, day in and day out. She was my best cheerleader. I called her when I won awards that I wouldn't talk about with other people. I called her when I had a great softball game, hit a home run. I called her when I went and got my first tattoo that is a tribute to her, my first and only, so far. And I just loved having a cheerleader, and that is what I will miss the very most, but that is what I want to pass on. I would like to be other people's cheerleader. She believed in that, and she stood for that. And I hope you guys will take that with you and think about that in your future, how to carry on her legacy of being other people's cheerleader. So I love you, Grandma. Thank you for giving all these gifts. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Back. So, I would not have been able to do what I did with my mother without the incredible aides that we had. They loved my mother, they took care of my mother, they treated her with the utmost respect, and I hope that she treated them with the utmost respect. I know that she constantly said, oh, you're wonderful, or thank you. So all of us in the family really, really appreciate all the time and love that you gave to her. So thank you very much. So Declan, you ready? Ready as we get.
That's a lot of people. All right. So I remember Grandma as an amazing woman that I bet everyone she knew loved. She impacted thousands of people's lives, including mine. I think back and remember all the great times we had playing pass, playing with bananagrams, playing with magnets and fake food. But most of all, I remember her as someone I will look up to and ask myself, what would Grandma do? This moment brings out lots of emotions, happy and sad. But there's one quote that comes to my mind, that is, be the change you wish to see. And Gandhi wrote that, and I think that Grandma was a leader who changed what she wanted to see changed. And that's what I think she was, a leader. Thank you.
Todd is. Ready to go? And I don't want to forget. So Harper, do you have a little brother? What's his name? So I forgot Bobby and Harper when I ran through the list of great-grandchildren. My apologies. I know you're going to grow up to be just like your great-grandma, okay? Here you go.
Hi, I'm Todd, Tom's oldest son. I don't think I can compete with an English teacher and a lawyer in terms of public speaking. I don't have a job that requires that, but I will try to win in the category of brevity. I've thought a lot over the past week or so about what made Grandma so special. I mean, I've always known the diverse list of traits, stories, talents, and accomplishments, but I've been trying to see if I could distill that down to a short explanation that embodies what was so amazing and so different about her, and that's no small task. Her list of impressive traits is long. If I tell a friend or coworker that my grandmother had some great recipes or was a great hostess, had a great story from World War II, or donated generously her time, her money, and even her blood, they say, mine too, but they don't understand. Sure, Grandma was outstanding in all of those ways, but those are not nearly unique enough to her to explain who she was. In addition to those great things, here's what I think was truly unique about my grandmother. How many times have you started a sentence with, I wish someone could improve the way, fill in the blank, works? Or I wish someone told that person blank could be done in a better way. Grandma not only had the mind capable of finding the solutions to these riddles, but she actually worked to implement her ideas. She could and actually did improve things, both large and small, in the world. Not many of my friends' grandmas had the intellect to design propellers in World War II, and fewer still actually did something about it. If she was attending a fancy gala, her artist mind could picture something to wear in her hair or on a scarf, and she would actually make something, wear it, and get a room full of compliments. She had kids born with hearing loss. She was smart enough to know what the solution she wanted was for them, and then actually followed through with those ideas and made them happen. Looking at shoe prints on the beach, she thought up a better design for those shoe soles and sent a letter to discuss her idea with Nike. I didn't love reading as a preteen. Grandma understood far better than 8th grade me the value of literature, and somehow tricked me into reading A Separate Peace and The Red Badge of Courage as part of our very exclusive, just the two of us, book club. There was no puzzle, mystery, obstacle, or challenge that she'd give up on. No matter what, Grandma could see a problem, dream a solution, and work until the solution happened. Sometimes that was big stuff, like helping a war effort or raising 4 kids. Other times, it was using a blowtorch and some lucite to make new shelves for her kitchen cabinets, installing a pneumatic doorbell, or solving literally thousands of consecutive New York Times Sunday crossword puzzles. I'd love to solve even a fraction of the riddles that she did by seeing obstacles, dreaming how to improve the world, or just my kitchen cabinets, and then working until my ideas are a reality. I doubt any of my friends had a grandma who could do that better than Betty Sonneborn. Thank you, Grandma.
So I'm not sure, is there anybody else in the family or the extended family? Pete, you want to say something? Come on, I want you to say something. By the way, you notice that all of the lower generations have electronic devices and I have paper.
I don't know if you can see me over this.
Yeah, you're old too.
Hello, my name is Katie, the forgotten grandchild.
I didn't forget you. It was Harper I forgot.
I'm Betsy's daughter, Betty's grandchild. Growing up, my grandmother was an amazing person. She was an avid volunteer, she was immensely creative, and she loved with her whole heart.
You got this, you got this. Oh, look, you did such a good job.
But you all know this, and that's why you're here today.
Do you like that? Oh, yeah, okay.
Good plan.
Growing up, my brother and I were the only local grandchildren. This meant seeing Grandma often. We had lots of time playing with the old toys she had from when my mom and uncles were younger. I'm sure a lot of you remember those. This also meant we got to help her with her garden. We got to go to local farms and go picking, mostly peas. She took us to State Museum and the Albany Institute. We pressed leaves and flowers and did puzzles. We went swimming and canoeing at Crystal Lake. She was not a regular babysitter for us. But when there were emergencies, she was always there. Pretty much she was always there for me because the emergency always involved somebody else in the emergency. She also occasionally picked me up from school, but she also occasionally forgot to pick me up from school. One experience that I had that was truly unique to me was being able to attend the same school. Sorry. Take your time. As both my mother and my grandmother, the Albany Academy for Girls. This was not only unique for our family, but it was very rare for other students to have multiple generations attend. Because of this, many of my teachers either knew my mother or my grandmother, which made a small school feel even smaller at times. I remember one year we were learning about the history of the school and got to rummage through the archives in the drawing room. And yes, our school had a drawing room. For me, this was not only learning about the history of the school, but learning more about my grandmother's experience attending. As a third generation lifer, I was occasionally pulled from classes if, yes, all three generations were on campus at the same time. And obviously photos needed to be taken. I was never one for attention, so this was often more embarrassing than anything for me. But I didn't seem to mind so much when it was math class that I got pulled from. Yes. Grandma was always the one that was hemming my jumper or skirt every year. Occasionally with this, I would get a little extra something made with the excess material. And if you attended the school or taught there, you knew that the skirts came down to the ankle, but we wore them above the knee. She made a Christmas ornament that I still have out of AAG plaid in the shape of a heart. And she also made a skirt for one of my American Girl dolls. So she too could be an Academy girl. Most people attend reunions with their classmates, and I often got to attend with my mom and grandma. I'm glad to have this connection with her and a place I can always go to think of her. Something that many of you may not know is that I was actually the last person to live with Grandma. After Grandpa passed, there was some time before she was able to move into Beverwick. I think we all felt that she probably shouldn't be living alone. So I decided I would move in and keep an eye on her. I'm so glad to have had that time with her, to hear more stories, some old and some new. We shared meals, where I often got scolded because I couldn't keep up with the amount of food she ate. 3-course meals every night, soup, a main course, and then always dessert.
Always the soup.
Always soup.
Always soup.
Soup is a staple of Grandma's diet. And one thing that you may not know is that everything that she cooked or heated up was stovetop or in the oven. The microwave was only to warm your plates for the meal. And if you haven't eaten off of warm plates, it's definitely something to try. One of my favorite memories of living with her is she kept telling her children that mice kept stealing her hearing aids. And when I moved in, I brought my cat at the time, who was infatuated with Grandma's couch. And we found out that there were, in fact, mice living in the couch. And while evicting the mice, we also found her hearing aids. Proof that Grandma, even in her early 90s, was still sharp as ever. She was amazing, and I'm so proud to be her favorite granddaughter, who lives in the Albany area. In closing, my remarks wouldn't be complete without a Harry Potter quote. So I will end with this. The ones we love never really leave us. You can always find them here. I'm grateful to have so much time with her, who had lived and grown up where she did, where memories of her are around every corner. And also for all of you who will carry her memory in your own way. Thank you.
So I was sure I was going to cry just as much as you did. I'm not sure how I didn't. But I have to say, I've been telling people for years that I learned more from my children than from my parents. And knowing my mother and her open mind in her 90s, I suspect you reinvented her world because you got to spend time with her. You and your brother got to spend much more time with her, but especially you, than any of her other grandchildren or great-grandchildren. So, maybe that's why you're as emotional as you are. I don't know if your brother's going to get up and try and outdo that. I wouldn't if I were him. But you're welcome to. Also, as you said that, I just have to say, take 30 seconds, because this is exactly the spirit of what you just talked about. So my wife was going off to Europe, and I talked to Matt, and he was 6 or 7 or something like that. And you're gonna like, so how are you gonna deal with the fact that, your mom is gonna be away? And he said, oh, you carry your mother in your heart always. And then she dies and you bury her in the backyard. He's outgrown that, but he still does speeches. They're just not as good as that one. So is there anybody else in the family before we invite other people? So who would like to come up and have something more to say? Come on, Liz. This is another one of my mother's children, really. She just happened to live next door.
I was very grateful. Actually, she introduced herself. She introduced me to one of her aides one day when I was there visiting as her 5th child. Well, I really only have to say that I have an answer for Dan's question of what is the essence of Mrs. Sonneborn. And for me, the motto is not the great intellect, not all of the, you can have those gifts. She had energy. I think of her, the only thing, the Energizer Bunny. The ability to take those ideas and have the energy to go forward with them. I didn't see roadblocks with her, and I always appreciated that about her. I'm just adding to what you all have said. The other thing is, she took me into her family in a way that was important to me at the time, and I loved her for it. I loved her.
Come on up. Well, Mr. Semenza, you come on up too, and you can go right after Sally.
Thank you very much.
Or Sarah.
Either or, I'm one or the other. I'm another daughter from another mother, along with Liz. But I go back to my birth with Aunt Betty. She was Aunt Betty. Betty and my mother, Martha Noble, were friends since kindergarten. She may have had her two sisters, and then she had my mother, including the bickering. Oh my God, did they bicker, those two. My mother could never imagine a better friend than Betty. She was always there for my mother through thick and thin, through my mother picking the worst man to marry, my mother divorcing that worst man to marry, my mother's financial problems thereafter, my mother's multiple cancers, my mother's very severe multiple sclerosis, and my mother's last 11 years bedridden in a nursing home for the last 11 years of her life. Betty was always there. I mean, Betty you took over just as you did. I mean, Betty was like you and your mother. She was there for my mother. I lived in Boston, in New York. And I always knew that Betty was going to be there for my mother. She set up a schedule when my mother checked into the nursing home, as if she had a choice. Yeah, I'm checking into this nursing home. When my mother was put into the nursing home, Betty set up a schedule so that there would be a friend visiting her every single day of the week. She even went back and found friends from years previously that could come visit my mother in the nursing home. Who does that? And she kept it up for 11 years. As they died off, she found other friends. I don't know how she did it, but she did. She, as we've said, she solves problems. Betty was there. She was extraordinary. She has been my Aunt Betty for my entire life. And growing up, Ma and I would go to the Sonneborns maybe every other Sunday for dinner, maybe about that. Honestly, as a kid, I'll just be honest, she scared the bejesus out of me. She really scared the bejesus out of me. Or she made me very angry. That at her 90th birthday party, I remember telling a story. She was determined to force me to learn how to swallow pills. She was determined. So one day my mother had to go somewhere and she left me off. And before my mother even closed the front door, Betty races to the freezer and pulls out a bag of frozen peas. Because she had it in her mind, she was determined to use this moment to force feed me peas so I would learn how to swallow pills. So for an hour, I swallowed those damn peas, which, peas are very important to Betty. So I swallowed the damn peas, but I still, because it was Betty, I wanted the last word. So I proceeded to throw up on the front carpet when I left. And she was fine, but she really got the last word because I did learn how to swallow pills. So hats off to Betty for that. I'm sorry about the carpet. I'm sure it's clean by now. Okay. As I got older, Betty became my surrogate mother. Now I know she was a surrogate mother to many, many, many people. To me, she was crucial. I didn't have other family. It was my mother, my husband, my son. She was as caring to me as she was to my mother for years, for 30 years. Every time I came to Boston, from Boston to Albany to visit my mother, which was a lot, I can't imagine not seeing Betty and Dick. I would always go to their house, and Ma would say, "You're not going to stay for very long, are you? You're coming back, aren't you?" Because she knew I loved being with them. They provided a release. They were great listeners. My husband and son went to the racetrack with them every summer. They became crucial in my life. After my mother died 20 years ago, Betty adopted me even more. We spoke every Friday. And I lived for those talks. As I went through my own difficulties with the health of our son, Betty was always there. But for the first time, she uncharacteristically couldn't solve a problem. And she would be so frustrated on the phone. "Oh, Sally, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help you. Oh my, I just don't know what to do about our son, Zach." And she was so frustrated. And for Betty, that's a lot. I mean, she tried her damnedest to solve every problem that was ever put in front of her. And this one, she couldn't. But she was so caring, so wonderful, and there were no opinions. That was, I mean, Betty always had opinions, but with this, she knew she couldn't. And it hurt her, but she was always there for me. My mother was blessed, I was blessed. Betty played a huge outsized role in our lives. She gave us unwavering loyalty, and I'd say loyal. She was the most loyal person I think I've ever known in my life. Unwavering through years and years, despite it all, good, the bad, the ugly. She never wavered. She was extraordinary. I love her very much. And I still talk to her. I talk to my mother. They're there somewhere. I know they are. But what I'm happiest about right now for Betty is that she's with Dick again. And boy, has she wanted to be with Dick all these years. That's all she talked about every time we spoke, was being with Dick again. So I'm very happy for her right now that she's with Dick. My Uncle Dick and my Aunt Betty. Thank you.
There's a phrase that nobody's used as, so are you going to come up? Are you going to want the mic back there? As they're coming up, and they'll tell you how much they were affected, because they were 3 doors and across the street from us. The word that really applies to my mother that people haven't used yet, and maybe you guys are, she loved life. She was joyous and happy and upbeat. I don't remember some of the things when she probably wasn't, but that was really one of the things that she did. She always looked at the positive. So who's going first?
Jim and Tom and Betsy and Dirk, where I think the Semenzas had a slight majority here today. There's 3 that couldn't be here, but they are with us. So I'm Michael Semenza, and from Amada, Monique, Ren, Chris, Monique, Nadine, and Peter. All of those beautiful words are from you and from generation to generation in the family here today. We were lucky enough to be just across the street and probably equidistant between the Aufsessers and the Sonneborns. And we had the great privilege of learning so many of those lessons. When we heard about a week ago from Dirk that Mrs. S had passed, I wish we could show you the text chain among the family from California to Binghamton, and it was really beautiful. And it was some of those lessons that were here today. It was about the joy that she brought to everyone. And it was about all those wonderful little things that we think about her every day. And she always made something learning too. She was the one who taught us at little kids' birthday parties that you couldn't put ice cream in the oven, by her famous baked Alaska, or there was another one we all remember, parsley, eating parsley from the gardens, and we can't look at a pansy without thinking of Mrs. S. Those are really the big and the small beautiful things, and so we know that you'll always be with us, and we are grateful to have had you in our lives from Divine Providence Street.
I just have a quick thing from Mrs. Sonneborn, a recipe that I found in my recipe box from my shower 44 years ago. And it is her flank steak recipe, marinade, and it says in parentheses, cheap but good enough for company. So this marinade has been amazing, and we've made it many a times, but unfortunately, flank steak is not cheap any longer. It is now $16.99. And I also have a grandson whose name is Gates, and I'm sure that my son and daughter-in-law had no idea that we used to pick parsley at the Aufsessers, and I was so happy when they named him that, because it just brought back all the great memories of Providence Street, your grandparents, your mom, dad.
That was money.
I'm going to be very short. Just as you had referred to other people describing their grandmother, and you knew what they were saying, but in your mind you knew it couldn't come close to your grandmother, that's the way that we talked about our neighborhood. Other people think about the neighborhood they grew up in and everything else. You can't describe it. It's like taking pictures of the Grand Canyon rather than being there. It was an amazing neighborhood, and I think what made it amazing was the Sonneborns were at one end, Aufsessers were at the other. They were like bookends. And in between those bookends, we had phenomenal families. There was the Cantwells, the Hangers, the Munsons, the Pecks, the Remays, and people stayed there forever. And so you guys made the neighborhood from one end to the other. And that's funny, they mentioned the parsley. It's the first thing I always think of. When I go down in Albany, I pass the Aufsesser's house, and we're raiding your grandmother's garden, the parsley and the carrots and everything else. And the doors were always open, and we really appreciate that. And God bless your mom, because she was a big part of that neighborhood. And she did give me one bit of information when I did buy Mrs. Rawls' old Cadillac and restore it. And she was walking down the street, and I took her for a ride, and she said the neighborhood always referred to that car as the Maroon Balloon. And I never knew that, but she taught me something. So God bless Betty, and God bless your family.
Very brave to follow your sister.
Yes. You can't tell, my sister and I have a little bit of Hamill lack of control when it comes to emotions, but I'll try my best. And Todd, I think I'm going to beat you with the brevity, so sorry about that. As we're, getting ready to wrap up, and I don't want to take too long because I have a 3.5-year-old toddler, and a hungry toddler is an incredibly dangerous thing. But I just wanted to leave you guys with some takeaways, other than, particular experiences. What I think made my grandmother so unique was her ability to match the energy required in the moment. And she was, we were lucky enough to bring Harper over when she was 1-2 years old. And it was like 2 kids there just playing. Nothing excited my grandmother more than busting out the toy box and getting down on her hands and knees with her grandkids. It was, and that ability matched with her ability to be a bulldog, to remove roadblocks in front of her and to do what's right and be thick-headed and be just exactly what needed to be at the time was something that, you know, not everyone can be as smart as her. Not everyone can have that mind, but bringing that mentality wherever you go and the energy required in the room was something that she was incredibly special at doing. So I just want to leave you with that. And the other thing that, you know, was amazing about her was her curiosity. That's why she had so many opinions, because she always got in deep, detailed conversations and matching that energy thing when she needed to be blunt, when she needed to be direct, she would be. And it was always at the right time, the right presence in the right way. And it was special. So we'll all miss her, but those things we can all kind of carry forward. So that's it.
You ready to go? As you come up, you look like you're gonna, don't cry. Be joyous.
I got it.
All right. So by the way, just in furtherance of what you just said, I remember when Alex and Stephanie were dating and they were visiting, and she asked them questions that parents aren't allowed to ask, like, when are you gonna get married? But what she said to them was, quit auditing life. It's a really interesting statement. Your turn.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I am Dirk's daughter, one of the three mighty granddaughters as well. But today I'm actually here representing a close family friend. So give me a second. Hi, everyone. I am Susie Henger-Schneeringer, and I grew up 2 houses from the Sonneborns on Providence Street. Dirk is 2 months and 2 days older than I am. He introduced me to my husband and was best man at our wedding. The night before our wedding, Betty and Dick hosted a party at our house for out-of-town wedding guests, for which Betty made a beautiful, unique invitation with her artwork. My parents were dear friends of Betty and Dick's that continued even after the kids left the nest. Betty continued with drinks and dinner with them when they moved to the Beverwick. Often we would have lunch at the Beverwick Cafe, and my parents, Betty, would join us. She also asked for me to lunch at the cafe after my parents passed. Ever the true friend, she would walk from her apartment to the assisted living facility to have lunch with my dad after my mom died. Some memories. Betty taught me to knit. She showed me how to take out the window sash and change the broken cord on the weight of the window. They enjoyed chats on the screened porch. Letting the neighborhood kids use their tiny amber-colored building blocks and matchbox cars all over the downstairs. Literally full weekend Monopoly games around the kitchen table. Kitchen counter full of cookies and Lebkuchen. Eating my mom's or my chili by the spoonful. The Hanukkah bush. Art projects. One stands out in particular, making metal zinnias by cutting apart and shaping soda cans and painting them. Blisters and cuts galore. Many dinners at 151 South Lake Avenue. It is impressionable, as an impressionable middle schooler, watching Mrs. S carve beef tongue, and then I had to eat it. I'm not sure I've eaten it since. Betty led by example. She took care of her parents, not an easy task as many of us have found out in our later years, but physical distance was not a problem. She walked from one end of Providence Street to the Aufsessers at the other end of the block. She took me to St. Margaret's Home for the Children and the Institute of the History of Art. She and my mom would work in the shop together as I hung about with them. She showed us that a woman can do anything. Mow the lawn, change the plumbing under the sink, paint a room, garden, or be president of various organizations, just to name a few. This is the hard part. I knew that I had grown up in the eyes when Betty told me that it was time I stopped calling her Mrs. S and to call her Betty. As her memory faded, she knew that was happening. She would talk about how she missed Dick, my parents, and other friends who had gone before her. She says she was ready to join them. Then she would say, "Susie, I guess you just have to play the cards that you are dealt." Well, Betty, I miss you, and I just want to say, you had one hell of a deck.
So I think we only have one final person who's, are you about ready? You're ready. So as McKenna comes up, we're going to have, come on, no, wait 1 second. One more person.
Hi, my name's Robin Ryan, and I met Betty in 2004 because I heard Jim and his wife talk at the Albany Academy graduation about her work during World War II. And I was there to hear the commencement speaker, Anna Quinlan, with my daughter. Anyway, over that summer, I just kept thinking about what Jim had talked about the marvel of it, someone who could go from being an art history major to designing airplanes, propellers. And the week that my 2 older children started up at school, I left messages for the Sonneborns I found in the phone book, and she called me back. She was incredulous that I thought this experience, what she'd done as a 20-something during the war, was worthy of a book. We met at her house, I think outside, because my toddler was asleep in the car, and she showed me her portfolio of art, and she said something, and I can't remember exactly, but it was like something about being curious and having these interests, and how that it just kept getting more interesting, and it was just, she was so deeply curious. We would meet at the playground near their house, near Mohawk Drive, or their house for lunch. My children, like all of you guys, would go and get the fun things in the back. But she had fun things all over the house. She had the kaleidoscopes, she had these like toys everywhere. She would also walk around with like word puzzles, and because she's Betty, my children felt at ease. So over the next many years, we met often, and it started out because of the book, but it developed into something much more, at least for me. She's one of the most important friendships in my life. We talked about life and each other's families, her children, her grandchildren, the annual Sonneborn Thanksgiving that gave her such joy. And we would go through the photos that you guys took afterwards and like look at all, and like I followed all of your progress, and she was so lit up. I loved her relationship with Dick. One time we were on a road trip up in Saratoga, and she took a call from Dick, who was then going into the office, and she needed to pick him up. And her face just lit up, and I took a photograph of that. And I asked her once about, what it takes, Betty. And you really have to have a good marriage. I mean, they met after they agreed to marry him after like 6 days. And she said she thought you needed to have self-respect and compassion. Anyway, I've just never met someone like Betty, who is just so obviously intelligent and engaged in life, and is such a roll up your sleeves kind of person. And it was so obviously fun. When one of my children had a 4th grade animal project, we went over to use her sewing machine, and she gets down on the floor, and she's helping stuff this 4-foot long felt doll's porpoise, and she was, easily 93 at the point. She has been a son in my life, and long before people started talking in the terms of like owning their privilege, Betty would talk about how lucky she was, and how lucky she was to have her parents and her younger sisters, and to grow up where she did in the neighborhood with dozens of children in the neighborhood, lucky to have gone to Albany Academy and to Wellesley, lucky to have met and married Dick, and lucky to have her children, and that they like each other, and they married people that they are enriched by, and her grandchildren. And I think that at the core of who Betty was, who she was with Dick and the family they raised, is that, which was with, I can only guess, is with a great deal of empathy, is that she made other people lucky. she had gotten those gifts, but it was through her community work and being who she was, she made other people lucky. She welcomed people in, her family welcomes people in, and I'm so grateful that I met Betty, and I love her.
So McKenna,
I have one more before McKenna. This will be very, very short. My name is Cameron Croft. I'm associated with the Albany Institute for many, many, many years. So I wanted to share one of my earliest memories of Betty. I thought long and hard whether I would do this, because it was part of Betty that stuck with me. So we're in the late 70s in the education department at the Albany Institute of History and Art, and I'm going to be Betty. But she was standing in front of me with, there were 3 women, and they came up to the young staff and they said, "We are the girls of the Institute. We don't smoke and we don't chew, and we don't go with boys that do." So that's Betty.
so not all of the children and great-grandchildren are getting up to speak. And as McKenna comes up, not everyone is a speaker. People do things in different ways, but how much our generation's children and grandchildren admired her is best perhaps exemplified by my son David, who doesn't want to get up and speak, but David's daughter's name is Elizabeth A. Sonneborn. McKenna, come on up. When McKenna is finished, that's it. There's food downstairs. We're all going to go down.
Hello, my name is McKenna, and I am Betty's great-granddaughter. I'm hoping to leave you all with some closing inspiration that I know great-grandma would love. I would like to dedicate this poem to all mothers and grandmothers like mine and like my mom's. This is a piece by Maya Angelou called Phenomenal Women. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model size, but when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. Then they form around me a hive of honeybees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist and the joy in my feet. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. I say it's in the arch of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my breasts, the grace of my style. I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. See, now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't have to shout or jump about or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say, it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need for my care. 'Cause I'm a woman, phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for
See you all
coming.
downstairs.
Yep.
Nice to see you. Yeah, I'll give you a call. Thank you so much for coming. Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a stereotype.
This head was called me upstairs like 4 or 5 times, so I need to go see my bear. I'm so glad you guys know it at the end. Much better place than I was before. My brothers are wondering. We do love it and respect, absolutely love it. I think we're going to be attribute that to both. She didn't tolerate it otherwise. I think we're going to be really clean for Thanksgiving. For 4 kids, 4 spouses, 11 grandchildren, 13 great-grandkids. And once in a while, we would be smart enough to bring a guest in that wasn't a member of the family. They would never make her Yeah, Michael, thank you for coming. Coming downstairs. Just for 5 minutes, just to say thank you to the people who spoke and whatever. Thank you again for coming, it was great.
I don't know whether it really they were having somewhat helpful, but also still very, very much like with the doctors and that every single friend was like, oh, that way is totally not the right way. This is totally the right way. And it's like, so everyone's just guessing. There's no science.
They're all right, but you're also
Well, you all have some success, but at various points. So yeah, and the other reason is it's like high risk. So there's a real chance that people aren't going to create. Like we're not going to put it on this is like, you just have to know, it could happen like, I'm gonna be okay. So, yep, it's like, if there's going to be this next year, I need to put in the effort this year so that this is good. So I'm showing. I've been doing this for a couple of years now, and nobody else does. Great.